Yeah, that's my daughter's, but I've stolen it. I've stolen it from her. I no, I never have, but I enjoy the cup. I tried to watch the movie.
Oh, Brandon says that we've only got audio coming from Michael, and that our audio is not coming through.
Oh no.
Ice?
Oh, he also apparently hears me.
Can you hear me? Maybe? I'm talking. This is a test. I'm talking.
It's just Josh apparently, says Brandon.
Okay.
All right. I've changed the
Well,
input device on the capture, so hopefully that fixes that for us.
Brandon is typing to let me know. But for anyone who missed it, we were commenting on how nice Michael's cup was. Uh,
I was
Yes, we were talking about my World of Warcraft cup. I think before I quit on the movie, there was one line I really enjoyed. One of somebody was saying to somebody, they said, "Do you imagine that you are frightening to us? Back home, we have pets more frightening than you." That was my takeaway from the World of Warcraft movie. So I'm sure there was a lot more to it.
I mean, if you're only going to take one thing away, that's a pretty sweet line. Let's not lie to ourselves.
I've thought about it more often than I like to admit. It made me feel like, well, if they're not scary, certainly I am not scary. That's probably a good thing, but I don't know that. We've been home an awful lot, and just sometimes there's it seems like there's not enough to think about, so you think about stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's fair. That's fair.
very, very quarantine mood there.
Yeah.
But Brandon says that your audio is working now, Josh. So we're all good.
Okay,
Okay.
so it literally was that I didn't have the right input set in OBS. That's just how it goes. I feel like every time I start up OBS, there's one thing that's been changed how it's set, and it's now wrong, and I won't know about it until we go to start streaming. I think that is just the cycle
That's
for
kind
me.
of life, maybe. So, just generally.
Have
Yeah.
have any of you guys been reading things not book club book?
I have a lovely copy of Harrow the Ninth sitting on my bookshelf, which is not quite book club, though book club adjacent.
Yeah.
But I haven't so much as cracked the spine yet. It's just sitting there, pristine and beautiful, waiting my attentions. Um,
Michael, have you been doing lots of reading in quarantine or writing, perhaps?
I haven't really read in any quantity for a while, and the reason for that is that I was dumb enough to try to write two books at the same time and send them to my agent at the same time, and now we're both busier than so I go to work, I come home, I do my writing stuff, and then I shut down and watch a movie or something before it's time to go to bed and play with my dog because uh, yeah, my brain is it's just melted too much to do a lot of reading, and I'm ashamed of that. Right, writers ought to read.
I
Those are
can't
all
be writing
productive
two
reading.
books at once. Yeah, that's wild. It's like trying to learn two languages
It's
at
a
once.
bad idea. What I got is two books that need an awful lot of work. So it's not gonna that's not gonna be any fun, or maybe it will be. But yeah, one of them is 300 over 300. It's like 364,000 words long, and then the other one isn't. One's a fantasy novel. I've never written a straight fantasy novel like with swords and magic people and stuff like that. And then the other one's about. Well, we can talk about it later. You said you were going to give me some time later to talk about what I was doing, so I don't want to use it. I don't want to spend that now.
Totally fair. Totally fair. I don't know, Lauren, Sharon, what do you think? Has it been long enough? Can we jump into business?
You're the
Yeah.
head of the stream stuff.
I mean, I
defer
haven't-
to you.
I haven't seen a lot of people pop into chat just yet. But let me double check and see if
I've been,
anything has been
reading a
said
lot
in
of
chat.
manga and watching a lot of anime recently. It's been my recent quarantine comfort food. Been good.
We've just been doing too much D&D scenario writing.
Mhm.
So writing specifically for Dungeons and Dragons, that sort of thing. So that's been fun. I'm new to that, so I have to ask Josh and Brandon and everyone else for pointers all the time. But then I go and bug Lauren about it afterwards and say, Lauren, guess what I'm doing?
It's been interesting to see your creative process there. I really enjoyed it.
You say it like it's a actual set system that I now have, like a set of skills.
Yeah, it is. And if you say it confidently, it even more is.
Well,
She's got you there.
I
The,
think,
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think we're probably good to go ahead and get into stuff. At
Yeah.
least the introductions from folks. Yeah.
Yeah. So Mike, I'll start with you since you're the special guest, the guest of honor, if you will.
Am I supposed to? I introduce myself. Is that what we're
Yep.
doing here? Okay.
That's where we're at.
All right. Hi. My name's Michael Poore. I'm a teacher and a writer who lives in Highland, Indiana, with a wife and a dog, daughter and a cat and a dog. And a few years ago, I wrote a book called Reincarnation Blues, which I guess we're going to be discussing this evening. And I'm sitting in my Jeep, just in case you're wondering.
All right, and from there, let's go around. So Sharon, you're up next.
Great. I'm Sharon from Goblins and Growlers. I'm very excited to talk about Reincarnation Blues, which was my recommendation for this month's book. I did want to, from the top, apologize for not giving better trigger warnings from the get-go. I was very excited to recommend the book, but I had read it about a year ago, so my bad, you guys. But I hope that you enjoyed it. I have had a lot of fun rereading it, so I'm looking forward to talking about it today.
And next up, we've got Lauren.
Hello, I'm Lauren. Lover of sci-fi, fantasy, and romance. I have a book Instagram where I mostly just talk about books that I like at Feminist Reading List. I think that's it.
And I'm Josh Maltby. I'll be the host and moderator for the evening. I am the co-owner of Goblins and Growlers, and I'm so excited for tonight. So, just to kind of start things off, Michael, we did look at some of the interviews that you've given on Reincarnation Blues because we try to keep things new and fresh so that you're not answering the same questions you've already answered 20 times in 7 different places. So the first thing we'd like to ask about, we've been running book club for 6 months now. Is that right?
Has it been that long?
Has it been that long? Or is it more like 5?
I
So,
think it was 5.
so we were curious. We know you haven't been reading for a little while, but we've gone through some books that are a little bit older, and we were curious if you've read any of the other books that we have. Most recently, before Reincarnation Blues, we read The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin.
I have not read that.
Okay.
I think that one is the highest ranked from within our book club. So, I feel like it's safe to say that if our book club could recommend one of the books that we've read from book club to you, it would be that one.
I will say N.K. Jemisin does a really good job of capturing, much like you did in Reincarnation Blues, many of the aspects of human life can be very difficult at times, and you can learn a lot very quickly by having difficult times.
I think also, if I were to draw another parallel, it would be on like the cyclical nature of life. Um, so in the fifth season, you're talking about like cultures and societies like rising and falling rather than an individual life, but there's definitely some parallels there.
So strong recommendation if you get a chance to pick it up and check it out. If you find
Yeah, it's definitely on my list. She's been discussed in my crit group. Two of my crit groups actually. So definitely someone who's on the forefront of writing what needs to be written and saying what needs to be said.
absolutely, yeah, we that was another book that we were like, man, there's tough stuff in here, you guys. So, speaking of preparing to tell, like speaking of stories and kind of like the building thereof, how do you prepare to tell a story, or in the case of Reincarnation Blues, a series of stories within a story about an experience or a culture that's so different from the one you're typically surrounded by?
I tend to draw pretty much on what I know. It wasn't so much. I didn't want to put so much like the Hindi culture into the book. Although I wound up doing that. My first draft, I sent my agent came back with this. This would probably be better if it wasn't so religious. That's not exactly what she said, but it was drenched in Hinduism. Details that I don't even know if I would remember now. But basically, we got back to basics, and the whole thing was just based on the idea of internal exploration. I've always wanted to explore, find new places and everything. And if you can't really see me, but I'm a big guy. I'm not in such great shape, and it became obvious I wasn't going to be a mountaineer or a deep sea diver or anything. So internal exploration was pretty much what was left. So ever since I was a kid, that's where I've been trying to go. And then as I got older and met different people from different places, being able to talk to people who were experts in Eastern religions, because that's what they were brought up with. I've got a good friend now who's in his early 70s who having a conversation with him about religion is like exploring is like an exploration in and of itself. So some of it came from people that I know. Obviously, reading. I went out when I had this idea and decided I wanted to do a book. One of the first things I did was go out and I bought some books to support it, and one of those was the Bhagavad Gita, which wound up having precious little to do with the book in the end, but it kind of gave me something to refer to for language and tone and that whole world. But also, I should mention, I've got a couple of close relatives who live out in Tucson, Arizona, and that's getting over toward the West Coast. And sure enough, every once in a while they will join this or that group of people who are explorers in one way or the other. Sometimes it has to do with people from outer space. It's going to sound like I'm making fun, and I'm not, because they're very serious and they're very scholarly about it. So every once in a while I would get to go to meetings with them, and then come home to either Ohio, where I used to live, or here, and it's just a very different mindset culturally. I think I wandered a little far afield from your question. And also, to be honest, when I was getting ready to write Reincarnation Blues, I watched a lot of TV. I watched a lot of shows about the Buddha and about people, teachers like Ram Dass and different writers, and documentaries about India and everything. So there was a lot of TV, there was a lot of reading. I really did just steep myself in it. And then I feel like I've run on too long about this question, but I did want to mention that Milo in the book is not so good at meditating because I have never really managed to get on top of it. So I'll stop there.
I felt very relatable to the whole like trying to meditate, but I guess not so good at it. Just noticing things, and then your mind just goes off track.
That was one of my favorite like little quirks running throughout his lives, because it's so relatable, especially in these like really fantastical situations. Just the absolute struggle to like quiet your mind and meditate, and I don't know, I found it fairly charming.
I found it charming too, which is good since I was unsuccessful. So yeah, it's frustrating, isn't it? You're trying really hard, but as long as you're noticing what's going on, then you're not doing it, I guess. Although I've heard other schools of thought that say that well, as long as you're trying, who's to say that that's not meditating too?
It's like trying to notice everything all at once and none of it all at the same time. And
Right? Yeah.
how do you balance that?
Do not know. No, but what I've heard people who do it successfully, it's difficult. You're not just sitting there sort of half asleep. It's not like that at all. You're focusing on your breathing and sitting up straight. I mean, it's physically, if you're not used to it, it's really uncomfortable and difficult to do. So it's not just people who use terms like navel gazers and things like that really don't know what they're talking about. It's hard work, at least at first. I have now said everything I know about meditating.
I just realized my AC is running in the background, which is probably a lovely noise for all of our listeners. So I'm going to go switch that off. Lauren, if you will grab the next question, I'll be back in just a moment.
Sure. Let's see. Just give me a sec to pull this up. All right, so we already touched a bit on, this is a question from our book chat, and we already touched a bit on the spiritualism and the understanding of perfection and meditation. One thing we didn't get to was, what's the number one thing you want people to take away from the book? Like, is there any concept or feeling or sort of idea that you want to leave readers with?
Yeah, I never really articulated it when I was writing the book until I got closer to the end. But basically, multiplicity. I wanted people to take away a sense of wonder at all the vast possibilities of human experience, and there was a reason for that. As I got into the book, I wanted the book to, if possible, do good things. And then that had to do with the spiritual immersion that I was attempting. I wanted to make a book that would make me better, yes, in writing it. And I feel that the more you know about of others, and the more that you feel that you're in the lives of others, the more empathetic you become. And if we were all to become more empathetic, what we couldn't do. All the suffering in the world, I think it comes in large part from because people just don't imagine what it's like to be somebody else. We don't walk a mile in other people's shoes. So I was trying to get people to walk in a lot of shoes and see what came of that.
I think that's probably why I liked this book so much. Is just like taking people or situations like far in the future or way in the past even, that are very other, and like giving people something that they can really relate to on some level or understand or empathize or sympathize with, and just like I think you succeeded.
And I think you see Milo's empathy grow across the story. Certainly from like the introduction, where he's like a surfer dude, just doing his thing, getting by, to sort of the end where, well, he sacrifices himself several times, but I think definitely you see his empathy grow as you get exposed to more and more of his lives, and as he experiences more and more of them.
Also really liked the first chapter as far as it like sets the tone for the whole book. Like particularly with all of the different parts where they're like, it would have been a nice, generous note for him to die here, but he didn't. And then only after he dies is he able to see, like, even though he was like a wise man in his life and he was, he meditated and he was like one with his surroundings, it was only like after he died that he could look back and be like, oh yeah, I guess it wasn't really very much about people, and he didn't really hit it on the nose, even though he was a wise man. And I thought that did a really good job of like setting the tone for the whole book.
Lost Limey in chat just wants to kind of piggyback on the back of that. I don't know if I'd call the off-switch version of Milo towards the middle of the book all that empathetic. That's kind of the idea.
Yes, and I want to talk about that later. I have some very hand-scribbled notes about nature and nurture and what makes an ethical choice, and that chapter, and like, I mean, clearly outlined was like, this is a problem he was born with, and then like, how are you supposed to, well, anyway, but yeah, I definitely want to talk about that chapter.
I think we're at the point where we wanted to jump into, there's 3 particularly difficult chapters in here. There's Chapter 14. Would you not claw the carpet while I'm streaming? Goodness. There's Chapter 14, where Milo has all these ambitions of becoming the next Lord Byron and being very excited about what life is going to be like as a great poet scholar. And then a false rape accusation gets him sent to space prison, and life is just so awful there. I think we as hosts wanted to acknowledge kind of at the top that we recognize that a actual rape accusation has trouble enough getting through today's court system, where a false one, who even knows what like the odds of that getting through would be. But the question that we kind of had was, when you were presenting your crit group with these 3 chapters, 14, 18, and 24, 18 being when he had the off switch, and then 24 being his final chance, his final life, but specifically the use of the N-word in that chapter. When you approached your crit group and you were like, hey, here's what I'm doing, here's what I'm working with, here's what I'm thinking of, like, here's what I've got for impact, were they like, oh, Michael, you can't do these things. People will be so angry.
Yeah, I was particularly kind of struck by chapter, was it 14? Because not only is there like a false sexual assault accusation, but then he goes to prison and is actually assaulted, and so there wasn't a whole lot of like context around that, which is troubling. And then it also like like from a reader in a Me Too era and like a woman, it definitely casts men as like the ultimate victim in I guess assault and Me Too and like all of that. So that was a little concerning, I guess. What's your like process when you tackle or when you write about a subject like that?
Go back to let me come around to that. There's chapter 14 is one I hear a lot about, and it's one that I've thought it's probably the one I've thought about the most since writing the books. I did not have a crit group during the writing of this book. I've got 3 now, but one of the probably the best one had broken up for a few years, and we were not meeting when I was writing this book. Likely, we would have had a lot of good discussion about chapter 14.
I'm really sorry to interrupt. Can we define what a crit group is? Because I'm not a writer, and I can surmise from context clues, but I'm not confident. And then I know maybe some of the people in chat might not know what a crit group is. Sorry.
That's a great question. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a group of people who get around and they share their work and they criticize each other.
Okay.
Sometimes you might hear, oh, this is wonderful. Everything you've done is just lovely, which is useless. So the crit group that I'm talking about, the one that wasn't meeting at the time, we call the mean group, because we got together because we decided, oh, you need to hear things that are difficult to hear. Otherwise, you're not going to improve, and you're not going to understand your own work as well. So, and just to segue back, this chapter is a perfect example of that. I was when I my
Oh no.
process in I wasn't focused enough on her. I was focusing on Milo needing something that made him a victim of circumstances, and something that was unexpected. Kind of happy with the fact that she was so smart and that she was so self-possessed and that she was in charge of this elite group of dramatists and everything. And it wasn't until when you write a book, something happens the day the book actually goes on the shelf. That's when you become aware of everything you did in the book that's either messed up or something you wish you'd done differently. And that was the case with this. Then I just felt that she'd been treated unjustly. That's been 4 years ago now, and now in terms of political thought, in terms of our awareness of justice, we live in a world we were talking about a little bit ago. Women who do bring rape accusations to the courts. We're aware that they need to be believed. They need to be, treated as an experience that requires a response. And here I put up this character that went out and lied. And it's not just that. And here I have to credit my wife. This is the way my wife talked about it. She's a college professor, and she said, "You put her in a position where she co-opted the male dynamic. She was powerful. She was smart. She initiated a sexual situation, and where that for a male character, he might be lauded and receive rewards for this kind of behavior, but she has to be crazy. In the end, we find out that all of her power came from the fact, not all of it, but some of her actions came from being mentally ill. Of which I just wish I'd done it differently. You asked if it was suggested that maybe something else had taken Milo to prison, and absolutely. The idea that when you put something out there in the big conversation, whether it's in a book or something you say or something that you do, you hope it's going to create the kind of consciousness that will build justice instead of people to room to doubt. So that's my take on that part of chapter 14. So.
That also sounds a lot like Milo's first life, where it's only afterwards that you're like,
Very much, yes. If I had gotten to go up to heaven or whatever after chapter 14, I know Well, all three of the women would have had something to say about that. But I would have been most afraid of what Susie had to say.
Uh, I did think that chapter 14 did a very good job of like painting a picture that your readers would probably find very relatable, and then doing what you said you wanted, like a jarring circumstance, um, to bring him to his life in prison. And that whole chapter, I think that that's probably why it sticks with people so much, is because it's so, even though it's set way in the future, it's in such a familiar setting, and so I feel like it's like a double whammy.
I think the other reason that chapter hits everybody as hard as it does is because up to that point, Milo has mishaps certainly, and Milo has problems, and he is far from perfect. But at no point does something happen which is so tonally dark as that chapter. And that chapter, like, it takes you from up here to way down here. And it's like a wet slap in the face that takes you there. So it's like, holy smokes. Like the wow.
And that was supposed to be the purpose of that chapter and the later chapter is to generate an emotional response that was one of horror, because the fact is that numerous people, uh, millions of people are out there right now in situations that are worse than horror movies that you've seen. There are people buried under a building right now that they're trying to rescue. There are people who are, well, it's in the book, and you said you wanted to keep it PG-13, so I don't think I need to go there in the interview, but I think it's critical. It's imperative to realize that, and think. Some people have said that in order to achieve peace, one of the things we need to do is think about war.
Yeah, acknowledging. I think that the book and its big tonal shifts like that do a very good job of acknowledging all aspects of like the spectrum of life. And that chapter is like a perfect example in just one chapter of like from high to low, like very, very succinctly.
Yeah.
All right, Lauren, you had hella notes on chapter 18, the the off switch chapter, or did you
Oh,
want to get into that in the actual like book
I can talk about
discussion?
it in the actual book discussion. It was mostly about like nature versus nurture, what is free choice, that kind of thing.
Okay.
I found that chapter to be particularly interesting. I think uh, also to plug as a vegan, the whole slaughterhouse and like the horror of that and the
Oh my gosh.
desensitization to violence. Like that was a really cool chapter that I enjoyed because it was like creepy and dark and raised like interesting moral questions. And then the chapter where he kills Buddha was probably my all-time favorite. Loved it, hilarious, super dark, but also I think like tied together some of the um, like themes and stuff. But that's totally an aside. I think those were maybe two of my favorite chapters. But,
Yeah. I know chapter 18 there was a lot of readers who were like, "Man, I'm so glad. I'm so glad that it ended where it did because I was so concerned about where it was going." And
uh,
I'm like, I bet Milo's past lives feel the same way.
yeah, I mean, I totally get that. I've watched like 12 seasons of Criminal Minds, so like the whole serial killer thing, and like I listen to like My Favorite Murder and stuff. So like, uh, I found it like an interesting like discussion, and I think, well, if we want to just talk about it now, I don't mind. So um, like the physiology versus like free choice and the tension between the two. So the off switch being he was born, like his brain just did that, and like he was born a sociopath or whatever. And so like what free choice did Milo have? And like if we're talking about reincarnation, and that tends to argue that you have free will and you're responsible for the choices you make in life, and that butts right up against this concept that like people are mentally ill. He questionably had a choice. Like he was born with these like urges that he couldn't help, and so like what does it mean to like live a good life in that situation? And I think that's a theme that you see in chapter 14 as well, both with um, the woman who I can't remember her name. She the one who made the false accusation, where she got treatment and that cured her. And so it was like very much an argument for like that is like a mental health physiological issue that she's maybe not responsible for. And then in chapter 14 as well, Milo changes the like neural pathways of a lot of the prisoners. And so there's sort of an interesting argument that like they were born that way, like that is an inherent issue that they have to contend with. Are they responsible for their actions? And so it seems like a very interesting conflict with the book, where everything's like reincarnation, you're responsible for your actions, you need to act ethically and achieve enlightenment, and then at the same time like can you actually do that? And I think the two Mother and I forget the name of the other one.
Nan.
Oh, Nan, yeah.
They seem
Cat lady.
yeah, they seem to take that into account, at least with chapter 18, where they were like, yeah, but you did kind of the best you could in that situation. So I guess they kind of acknowledge nuance there, but I still thought it was an interesting theme.
Yeah, there was a reason why that at the end of that life it was Nan, not among the women his biggest fan, who was the one who came along and picked him up off the ground and talked to him. So yeah, that was a tough one. So yeah, I wanted we could probably go back and forth on the nature nurture thing all forever.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of brain research that has come out to talk about how our circumstances and things and choices that we make actually physically reshape our brains. If I were to spend if I'd done more reading in the last 6 months, my brain would be physiologically different. It would be more effective. Doing puzzles and things like that. And, likewise, there are things that make your brain work in other ways. So I think there's a lot to be said, a lot to be investigated about that line. It's not really a line between what are the choices that we make, what's what free will do we have, and I kind of felt like something that was developed through the book was that this is so hard to have to achieve a perfect moment or a action or something like that. It's because the circumstances get in the way almost always. 10,000 lives is a lot of well, not everybody takes that long in the context of the book, but you need a lot of lives to be able to have one that comes out like that. So it'd be interesting to be able to get in Milo's head literally and look at how his brain changed between one choice and the next, or one life or the next. I've thought sometimes recently that if that chapter were the whole book, we needed the off switch. We could have explored how Milo's choices shaped his life a little bit. The off switch kind of turns him into two people. He's got this person who's pathological. He has no feelings about people. Everything's just sort of an interesting story, and everyone and the other people in his life are characters. in it. And he's got another one when the off switch is himself, if you will. He's horrified by it. I mean, can you imagine? What if you went sleepwalking every 10th night and you didn't know you did when you woke up, or like an alcoholic blackout? It's kind of like that. So he's got one part of his life where he's responsible for the whole thing and doesn't have choice, doesn't have a lot of control over. So I didn't know how that was going to end until it did. That happens a lot.
I'm glad it ended. I thought it ended really well on like a hopeful note.
It did.
Yeah, I was happy with the way it ended, but I wasn't sure that was an adventure. I did a lot of driving around during that chapter, not shooting at people, but just driving around.
And hopefully not being shot at yourself.
As far as I know, not hit anyway.
I think
we had a freeway shooter up here just about a mile from where my house is. It's called Klein Avenue, and we had a BB gun shooter there one summer. Nobody was seriously injured, but you had to wonder if you'd get dissatisfied with the BBs after a while. So that, and then that's not the only shooter that there's been like that.
That's really interesting.
Well, there was, when I was growing up in Colorado, there were a pair of teenage boys who apparently had played a little bit too much Grand Theft Auto and had dissociated real life from video games, or at least that was the claim that was made in court. Yeah. I don't know how actual that is, but they took a shotgun out to a freeway, and I'll leave the rest to your imagination. And that's just thinking about that sort of dissociation from recognizing people as other living beings, as their own lives, their own stories, and their own, impetus. It's horrifying to me because I can't imagine what it must be like inside that person's head. But for them, that's just life.
And DC sniper, so definitely still like an era that's remembered by people in the area.
Yeah. No, for sure.
It was a very interesting perspective to include amongst all of the other perspectives, because it's something that is, like, for people who have lots of empathy, another way to be jarring and to look at something that is other, and like, not something that is like other in like, oh, I'm being accepting of other cultures, but other in I don't understand how this person exists. I don't know how they can be like this. I think that it was a very good way to include something like that in the series of lives.
All right. So the final thing I wanted to ask about was chapter 24. Obviously a very emotionally difficult chapter on a lot of levels. The thing we were curious about, though, which we thought you were still taking all of this to your crit group at the time, that we were like, I wonder what they thought about all this. But now that we know that that's not the case, what we're curious about for you yourself, you undoubtedly knew that you could have used a euphemism that wasn't the N-word, but you were like,
"Hey, Josh, can you?"
Yes.
You froze for just a minute there, no, but I understand your question, because you gave it to me for if there was if I thought about using another euphemism or whatnot. I thought through this pretty thoroughly, and I did think about using another word, but there was a specific thing that I was trying to do, and that was I wanted the reader to identify the guards, the monitors, with a lot of the kind of law enforcement people that we have in the United States, in which case, a lot of the wrong kind of people go into what's a very nuanced and very difficult profession as if they can bludgeon their way through it, and they're mean to people. They're They use that word a lot. Living up near Chicago, I hear about this all the time, and it was a way of immediately identifying the monitors in the chapter as being that kind of bully that they had no sympathy for, no empathy with the people that they were in charge of. Uh, people that
I think it automatically like characterized them pretty perfectly, and
right.
had all kinds of other associated tones that everyone could just like immediately make that connection, even though it was sort of like a immediately like repulsive type of reaction.
And okay, so that being said, that was then. It's I would make I understand why I used the word then. Wouldn't do it now. It's we're living in a time when I think a lot of us are learning things at light speed. Then there are a lot of people out there. I don't understand why we have counter protesters when there's a Black Lives Matter march. I don't get it. Why there are people who still resist learning or still resist a little bit of human kindness, if you will. Anyhow, I think there's an awareness today that no matter what your rationale is, uh,
Oh,
I'm allowed to use that word in my right to use it. That's not my word to use. So, and probably wasn't at the time either, but there's a sharper, at least I have a sharper awareness of that now. So, the book was written in 2014. So for me, that is some distance ago on the journey that we all take. So yeah, that was a conscious choice. I have to say, I wish I'd done it differently, and it's not one I would make today.
I think that's fair, and I think it is reflective of the content of the book itself that you yourself, looking back at the book, go, I would do a few things differently next time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And one of those other things was, this is something that I've had discussions with people about, is that the books, Milo's lives aren't very diverse, and part of that's conscious because I needed to write what I know. So most of the characters are male. I would love, if I got to go back and put new stuff in. Who knows what happens when you write a second edition? But I would love to have more LGBTQ characters in that. I know a lot of people. I would know what I was writing about, and it was that I wish I've had people ask why there aren't more of those trans characters in the book, and there should be. It would have made the book better. Yeah, so that's another thing. Yeah, the book's about the conversation I had with an editor one time. The book is about everything, and so there are mistakes about everything.
I mean, as long as you're willing to be honest about it, and like everybody's human at the end of the day. I think the big thing is not only learning, but then expressing that you are learning. Like, hey, I'm not going to burn all of my previous copies of this book, but if I get a chance to go back, make a second edition, there's some changes I'd like to make.
That sounds like the theme of the book.
And we
And
do.
also, I think it's just inherent in like making a piece of art is that it's made in that time from that perspective,
Right.
and in some ways it is like it's like crystallized, like especially with like maybe books and TV shows. It's once it's made, it's fairly made, which is one of the flaws and like the beauties of like that like form of art.
Yeah, read an interview with Aldous Huxley one time. Somebody had asked him, "Would you go back and make changes to Brave New World?" And he said that might be fun. I could maybe make it a better book, but the fact is, I'm not the writer who wrote that book uh, anymore. And I agree with that. It makes perfect sense. But where would I like to read that book?
That's for the world of fan fiction.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. Well, that's fun to think about.
I would talk forever about fan fiction, so don't get me started.
But no, you're right. That's got to be one of the purposes of fan fiction, is to reimagine what the author either missed or couldn't, or because they're dead, or something like that. The project I'm working on now is fan fiction of a sort. So I'm a big believer in that.
It makes a static piece of art interactive in a way that nothing else does. Like you have this piece of fiction that's a fully realized and published and final piece of art, and then you have thousands of people from all over the world who are like, I'm inspired by this, and I'm going to interact with it and turn it into something new and wonderful and weird. And I love it so much. It's so interesting.
One of the things I just kind of, what you said just a moment ago, it does go out and get read. And one of the things, if you're really, really lucky, is it goes into other languages. It's been like, a lot of people have read it in Korea. In Korean. I mean, I open up that copy of the book and I don't know what that's. It could be anything. I'm sorry, I'm not educated enough to. Well, anyway, point being, so because it's in a different language, it's going to say different things, and the message is going to be different. And some people have a problem with that. I think that's magnificent. I think the more people who get to be a part of it, it becomes interactive. While it's still sort of the original book. So yeah, all of that.
I didn't even think of that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about when you do a translation of a book, certain things like idioms don't translate well. So the translator then has to make a choice. Do I translate a local idiom in so that people get the message, or do I leave the idiom what it is and make people go figure out what it means?
Some books are translated. I think a lot of books are translated by computer. Something maybe a little more nuanced than Google Translate, but nevertheless, it's a machine, and obviously that doesn't work. So when you have another human involved in it, they're basically a co-author.
Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier, I don't know if everyone on stream was logged in at the time, that I've been watching a lot of anime and reading a lot of manga. And a lot of that has official translations, fan translations, and then dubs, and they're all different. And my favorite are the fan translations because they care so much about keeping that original context that they will not translate the idioms. The idioms will be what they are in that language, and there'll be a translator's note that explains what the idiom means, and it's so wonderful and interesting. And it's one of my favorite things about fan translations of anime and manga, though they're not legal, so don't.
But what you do
one
is
of my favorite things about other languages in general is comparing idioms and like trying to find ones that are similar or different. And then also related is animal sounds, which makes no sense, but I love to hear, like, so what sound does a rooster make in Hungarian or Persian? Yeah. And then comparing to what we know rooster sounds like in English. So I digress.
So go out, buy the official copy, and then download the fan translation, because you don't have to feel bad about it because you bought the official copy.
There you go.
So something that you are our first guest on stream. Thank you very much for joining us. But something we came up with while we were thinking about, like, what questions do we want to ask Michael, and this is ending up being a lot more like a typical book club discussion. So it may very well just like we're gonna run through these questions about the same time as it's wrap up time, but I'm okay with that if everyone else is. What is a way that you as an author can use your platform to build more inclusive spaces, either in literary and nerdy spaces or just kind of in general?
To build more inclusive spaces. It seems like the first thing that comes to mind is in the characters that are used in the stories that are told. I keep trying to avoid talking about what I'm working on now, but it kind of dovetails into the question you just asked. I'm writing a book about Captain Ahab. It's basically a biography of him and his best friend. To and including the voyage that they, when he basically goes crazy and takes off after Moby Dick.
Before you go any further, if your publisher is going to come after us and our entire stream with, hey, you guys can't talk to anybody about anything you heard on this entire stream, I came back and watched it later and I'm so mad at Mike right now. I don't want you to get yourself and in turn all of us in trouble. No. Do whatever you got to do to keep us.
Oh, this is all good. I've talked to my agent about this and everything. And
okay.
Moby Dick is 100 years old, so we're all good. Oh, it's well over 100 years old, so we're all good. Well, the environment that a lot of the book happens in, it takes place on various whale ships out at sea, and whale ships were a very cosmopolitan environment. You had people from all over the world, and it was in a large part egalitarian. It was a meritocracy. If you did your job and didn't get people killed and helped everybody make money, they didn't care. At least in much of the reading that I've done, where your ancestry was even necessarily what your background. Being said, it doesn't really address. It's got strong female characters in it, but they are not at sea in the boat during that part of the book, so that's not necessarily very inclusive. But shorter answer to your question is in the characters that are selected and the stories that we choose. And I want to say that seems so important now. It used to be, I think most of us writers tend to be a certain kind of person. Now that I said that out loud, I don't know that that's true. There's a certain approximation of human value that I think we all recognize. And it used to be something I think that we were all working hard toward, or at least thought for. And now it's like literally a fight. We're literally scrapping in the streets over the meaning of justice and things like inclusivity. So where it's done, I'm pretty much convinced needs to be the reason we write at this point, or the reason we make music, or someone.
One of the folks we have in chat, kind of dovetailing on what you were talking about, she was talking about how diversity is tricky as a writer, because there are also people who could say you can't write about a minority POV that you don't personally live. And so in kind of that vein, you end up not satisfying anyone, because if you're only writing about your personal experiences, they're like, well, where are all the other people? Like, where is all the other people in your world? And I think the argument then that I've seen and heard made is, and this actually came up during a panel on diversity this past weekend at DragonCon. They were talking about, how do you avoid tokenism? How do you avoid bringing on someone who's a good friend and who is, a great voice in this space, but also happens to be the only gay person on the panel? And so then they end up being kind of the token gay on the panel. And that person, he was like, here's how you handle that. You take a step back and you ask yourself, why is this my only gay friend? Why don't I have more gay friends? How do I go about making more gay friends? Because really, you could be broadening your own life experience while simultaneously broadening the perspectives that you can see, all at once. And I'm almost word for word stealing what he said when I say that, but I think it fits really well here because it's, if you're going to write about a minority point of view and people come to you and say, well, but you are not representative of that minority, you can say, well, I have a lot of experience with, I associate with this minority a lot. These are some of my best friends. I worked with them very closely on making sure that I was doing that perspective service as opposed to speaking over it or making myself out to be something I'm not. And I think that's really key right now, is making sure that we as people are diversifying the people that we spend time with. Not like an HR team recruiting to make sure that we can hit those tax breaks, but making
Right.
sure that we as people are getting out and experiencing the world and not just a bubble within the world.
It's like Michael said, wonder in multiplicity.
That's an excellent point, though. I mean, that multiplicity has to be part of your life, just something like, oh, I've decided to write about these people that I have no experience with, and that I'm not. And that's all something to think about. Maybe we do or don't do certain projects based on that. And that's just my way of stumbling around saying I don't know what the answer is. As I think that's supposed to happen as you get older, or at least it certainly does. That you know less all the time and become less steady on your feet.
Well, how does the old saying go? The more I know, the less I know I know.
Yeah, you keep finding out, oh my goodness, there's this giant room over here, there's all this territory, there's this whole landscape that I didn't even know existed. And all it takes is a question or meeting someone new, to open that up for you. And you just really, and that can be invigorating and mind blowing, or it can just be really scary.
Can I quote the book?
Yeah, quote the book.
Okay, I've got it highlighted and everything. Balbier squinted, thinking. I don't know, he said. Milo was surprised. He had never heard a teacher or a serious student say, I don't know. It sounded frightfully intelligent. That just stood out for me. I don't know what chapter this is. This is the Buddha chapter.
It's 23.
Yeah, and so
He knows the number.
the courage and intelligence in saying I don't know. I just really liked that.
Okay.
So
that's just something as a teacher I've learned never to pretend to know something to my students. It's disrespectful and it'll get you in trouble. Okay, so now that you read that line, I stole that from the movie The Core. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. I didn't directly steal it, but there's a very self-involved scientist who's on this mission, and someone asks him a question. He says, what are these black areas that we can't see, that the computer can't read? And he says, there are many. And then one of the other scientists says, say it with me, I don't know. So yeah, I shoplifted that.
yeah.
I mean, what is literature if not shoplifting experiences and things that you yourself have consumed and crafting them into something new?
There's
Fan fiction.
There's a lot of that in there, but not lines that are in the.
Yeah.
So any resemblance to actual persons living or dead is completely coincidental. Or to quote Kurt Vonnegut, yet all persons living or dead are completely coincidental.
I mean, there is some truth in that. All right, I'm trying to think. Lauren, do you want to grab the next one?
Oh, do we have more questions?
I think. Oh, you know what? We kind of already covered that.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think we're
All
good
right.
on
All right.
questions.
We got through the interviews questions. But I think we wound up touching on a lot of what we would do in our normal book discussion anyway.
Yeah.
Because the things that we targeted were the things that we were like, these are hot button topics. Folks in chat, if you have come up with more questions over the course of everything we've been talking about, please jump in, and we will get those to Mr. Poore. But for the moment, I would like to change the track of conversation a little bit, because since we've just finished up Reincarnation Blues, we are starting on this month's book, which is The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. Is that one that you're familiar with, Michael?
It is. As a matter of fact, I have a terrible memory that's getting worse all the time. But if memory serves, there's a computer in that. But I don't want to ruin it for anybody. Let's just say that I was asked to write a piece of fan fiction for a what was basically an inter-writer cage wrestling tournament. We were supposed to take a character from a book and write it in a conflict with another character from another book, and then there was a bracket and eventually there was a winner, and I don't remember what the winner was, but the
That
characters
sounds so
I
fun.
chose was from that book. I'm sorry.
That sounds so fun.
It was fun and confusing and very strange. So,
There is an AI character in that book, and I love AI characters. I think they're really interesting. I think an author's imagination on what artificial intelligence would look like and how they would view humanity is like so interesting and creative an avenue. So any book with like an AI character, I'm there. I'm sold. So
this is one where she goes fairly deeply into the character too, so that's good. I'm not sure.
We're definitely excited to get into it. If you want, I'll send you the link to the Discord, and you can be one of our many Discord lurkers and or participants. And so
when we do that, thanks.
When we start getting into those things, you can be like, yes, now I can talk about the things I wanted to talk about. So real quick, no questions have popped in, but we did get a real quick outpouring of thank you so much for coming. A lot of the audience are really excited to not only have you on stream, but also to be receiving the insight into the creative process that went into the book. There is a lot of excitement over having you here, which I mirror. Thank you.
yes, it's been so great. Like I feel like last time we spent a good amount of time being like, I wonder, what is this? What is this? I wonder. And it's so totally a privilege to be able to ask the author themselves. Super cool.
Well, it's a privilege both ways. I appreciate it. It's a really trippy experience. Of course, I've sat in book clubs and talked about other people's books, but when you're the one under discussion, I don't know how everybody else feels about it. It is unnerving a little bit. It's also really enjoyable, and a lot of things. I've heard about this all day long. Everything. It's been a real pleasure. It's been and a lot of food for thought. Great questions.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
So real quick, a couple of people have already started reading The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. So we're already getting feedback in chat that I'm already through the first 100 pages, I think Lost Limey said, and he was like, and I'm just burning through this book. So I'm very excited to get into that. I believe that was a Marion and Ali recommendation. So I'll be excited. I think Marion's in chat today. So I'm excited to get into it and then kind of hear Marion's thoughts on everyone's thoughts, so to speak. Um, do we have recommendations for voting for next month's book?
I know I brought two. I haven't given it as much thought as I would have liked because I forgot, but I have
That's okay.
two solid recommendations.
I'm going to let these yelling cats out of the office real quick. Go right ahead.
Okay. So the first is Ancillary Justice by Ann Leckie. This is my favorite sci-fi I read last year. Like, maybe favorite book. It's so good. It won the Hugo and the Nebula Award. The main character is an artificial intelligence. It's got themes. It's got sort of like big space. What's it called? Space opera vibes, but like with lots of questions about like what is consciousness, like what does it mean to be like an individual, because there's also like hive minds. It's super fun, super good. It's the first in a trilogy, sorry, but really good. And then for like a more lighthearted tone, I have Big Ship at the Edge of the Universe. So this is sci-fi, but it's really almost more of a fantasy. It takes place in space, but they use magic like all the time, and sort of it's a found family, sort of swashbuckling ragtag group of treasure hunters who stumble across sort of a catch that's like really out of their league, and they get pulled into this conspiracy. It's very like action packed and fast. It's got a cute, I don't know if I would call it cute. It's got like queer representation. It's sort of got the readability of young adult novel, but with like adult characters. To read the like one of the little blurbs on the back, that got me really interested in it is, do you miss Firefly? Do you want it back? Well, sorry, not gonna happen, but this book is damn close. And I don't know if anybody else was a Firefly fan back in the day, but I certainly was. And so this is like your sort of fast-paced adventures, like a little bit more lighthearted, and this is your like really good, you're gonna think about it late at night, kind of like chew on it sci-fi.
All right. Mike, do you have any recommendations for us? Oh, and of course he freezes at that.
I do. One of them is kind of in with what seems to be your theme. Let me. I'm outside, and it has now. It's begun to get dark. Okay, these are both books that I wasn't sure if you typically look for science fiction or exclusively for science fiction and fantasy. So my first, and I poetry. A lot of the writers I read are oddly enough, and well, okay. Anyway, the poet's name is Chris Citro. Last name is Citro, and I don't know why he only has one book out at this point, but he's got a book of prose poems that is nuts. It's fun to read. It's you could read it 86 times and not get everything out of it. It's called The Maintenance of the Shimmy Shammy. And whether you use it for your club or not, if you read that book, you'll be glad you did. Okay, and then the other one is Ted Kosmatka, the Flickerman. I don't know if you're familiar with it. That came out. I guess it's been out at least a year, but it's predicated on the idea that and the particles and what that means for the nature of reality. And the scientist who's at the heart of the story has to tangle with people who wish he hadn't uncovered what he uncovered. So that's The Flickerman by Ted Kosmaka.
All right.
Who is a member of the crit group that broke up for several years and then got back together. But,
oh wow! All right,
yeah.
so we could not only get insight into the sorts of things you're reading, but also the sorts of things that the people in your crit group are creating. For my hat in the ring, I am going to throw Robin Hobb's Assassin's Apprentice, which is if we want something that is very YA and very high fantasy, this is like right down in the middle of it. It is honestly a big part of. It's something that I read when I was a younger teen, I think 14 or so, and is a big part of why I play so many rogues in D&D today. So I really liked reading it back in the day. I've been looking for excuses to go back and reread it. So that is what I am going to throw onto the table. We have one slot open, so if anyone in chat wants to make a suggestion, I will take the first suggestion and throw it on the list. But while we're waiting for chat to catch up and throw in their suggestions, I'm going to go through chat real quick and see if there's anything that scrolled past without me really catching it. Glocken talking about chapter 18 where Milo has the off switch is talking about, hey, he was improving at times.
He was getting there. I don't know if he was going to get there.
I mean, that's kind of the joy of you ending that chapter where you ended it, is that you leave space to wonder, which I always appreciate when authors do, because I don't know about the rest of you. I'm not a big fan of the Silmarillion. I like those gaps in between the lore. I like being able to make assumptions and guesses and come to my own conclusions. And when somebody
things to chew on and like reason to chew on them, because there's no solution, there's no definite answer. You just cycle through it over and over again and then spiral off in different directions. Like how would this have gone if?
Yeah.
I mean, credit where credit's due. I don't know that anyone but Tolkien could have pulled off that kind of world building and it been as popular as it was. Because for a lot of people, when you go that deep into your own lore, it ends up looking like you're just constantly patting yourself on the back.
Well, to be fair, he was, but he was the first person to do it, so
there is a little forgiveness for that as well. Oh, here's a question I missed. The Brandon, I believe, actually asks. He's curious if Michael, if you drew any inspiration from Kim Stanley Robinson's Years of Rice and Salt, which also explores the idea of the reader following souls through their various reincarnations through time.
That would be no. I haven't read it, heard of it. So
I haven't read that one either.
I have that, and I started reading it, but I fell off of a reading cliff with it and didn't. It's over there. One day I'll finish it. It's over there.
My understanding from the little bit that Brandon and I talked about it was that it's very much like Reincarnation Blues, but with a significantly more somber kind of tone.
Mm.
Which I can see then why Reincarnation Blues would be that much more appealing for having read that.
It was rather grim, if I remember correctly. Without the balance that I think Reincarnation Blues has with the tone shifts.
Oh,
okay. I can do grim. That's fine. I'm gonna read that.
The first submission that I got was The Princess Bride by William Goldman, so that all of us can read the literary version of the film we like so much.
I've never read it.
I've also never read it, so
Same.
that could be really interesting.
That was
Okay.
like catch up homework, like that we've all been shirking that one thing that we should have done.
I've never read like any of the classics, like Pride and Prejudice, like never read it. Like they're just like I just like pretend. Just, like don't worry about it.
um, so we're coming up close on time, and at nothing demonstrates that more clearly than Michael slowly being shrouded in more and more darkness. Um,
Dramatically with the dome light behind me.
so let's go around and talk about real quick anything that we want to plug. I will start for a change because tomorrow evening, for everyone on stream, we're going to have a very special kind of like a Goblins and Growlers town hall meeting. The goblins that are at the head have been kind of giving a lot of thought to what we can do to make quarantine times as awesome as possible, and also to what post quarantine times are going to look like, and at what point do we start feeling comfortable about things like playing Dungeons and Dragons in breweries again, and under what circumstances. So tomorrow evening, that's going to be 6:30 in the normal gaming stream slot. We're going to be getting on to a Zoom call, and we're going to be posting that link in the Discord. Michael, I know you're new to the community, but you're more than welcome to join if you've got any thoughts. We're hearing all voices on this. That is my plug for the day. Lauren, what you got?
I will, I guess, plug my Instagram. If you want sci-fi, fantasy, and romance recommendations and discussion, you know, as told through like a queer feminist lens, follow me. I read a lot of books and like to talk to people about them. If I guess the other thing I would plug is I just did an interview on Goblins and Growlers. So if you go to the website, you can read my responses to the interview questions that Sharon came up with.
Lauren, you got anything? Or I'm sorry, you just plugged. Sharon, you got anything to plug?
Well, I'm going to tie both of your two plugs together, actually. On the community Zoom tomorrow, we're going to talk more about the direction that we want to go with Goblins and Growlers, particularly right now, and other ways that we can be like more reflective of the Goblins and Growlers community as a group, everybody that's so active on our Discord, and talking about what everyone wants to see and do together. One of those things that we want to have that more reflective of is our website. So goblinsandgrowlers.com. We're looking at new ways to include members of our community and like show people what everyone is doing. Like if you're a maker of things and you want to make things with the Goblins and Growlers community, or you just want to share a nerdy space where you can talk about the thing that you do, that's what we would really like to be able to display. So Lauren was our very wonderful, amazing guinea pig for our first character backstory blog entry. So we're looking forward to doing more of that. So that's my plug.
All right, Michael, take us home.
You guys have a really vital organization going here. You're into everything, and you're just so alive about it all. It's not every organization. I mean, we're here on Zoom, but you've also got chat going and everything. And I'm kind of thankful that this is kind of what my work world has looked like over the last 6 months. That I've been able to be sort of comfortable with this format and everything. But you know, bravo! This whole thing that you got going is wonderful. It's been a joy to be part of it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you so much.
What do you have to plug? What do you want us to go out and check out? What was something that would excite you if our whole community went out and did or read or saw?
Before COVID came along, I was scheduled to do a keynote address at something called the Gathering of Writers. It's part of the Indiana Organization of Writers. Anyway, so we're doing it virtually. It starts on the 24th. It runs through the 27th. It costs money, but I'm doing the keynote. There are lots of other presenters and panels and workshops and things like that. And then I'm doing a fiction intensive of workshops. So if you were to go online, or it's also on my website, and if you were to look up Gathering of Writers, and if you were to show up virtually and join us, that would be a joy.
I think that's very doable. Man, you didn't
I'll
even try
find
to.
out. I've never done anything like that online before, so yeah, I'm confident about it. I know it's going to be fun, but yeah.
Well, if you can speak as confidently there as you spoke here, I think you'll be in great shape.
Okay, I shall try.
Just real quick, Brandon in chat quoted you as saying this whole thing that you've got going is wonderful. Can we put that up on the website? Are you okay with that?
Yeah, of course, sure.
Very much appreciated. Everyone who's been tuning in from home, thank you so much for joining us. Mike, I'm going to send you a link to the Discord where you can participate at your own speed. And we're really excited about the workshop in Indiana that you've got coming up. And I'm sure there's a 7-second delay, so I'm sure that everyone's going to be wishing you well here very shortly. But in the meantime, I will take their place and wish you very well. I think it's going to be great. If you've already been teaching over Zoom, honestly, this is going to be easier than that. So
We'll see. I've taught kids over Zoom. We'll see what it's like working with adults.
I think you're going to have it. I think you're going to have it in the bag. I'm not even remotely concerned. Yeah, lots of well wishes from everyone. We've got at least one person who's doing applause and a peace sign. Thank you everyone for tuning in and checking things out with us. And we will see you tomorrow for the Goblin Moot, as Alon is calling it. And everybody have a great night. Bye, y'all.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. Thanks for joining us.